Informality really has to do with a decline in trust in institutions, and this is really true in virtually every country. If people don't trust the state, then they're not going to obey, its commands.
Welcome to Reality Check with Elena, a video podcast to inspire you. We challenge mainstream narratives and promote critical thinking by revealing the naked, often inconvenient reality on the ground. My guest today is Francis Fukuyama, a global intellectual, renowned political scientist, and best-selling author. He is well known for his bold analysis of political events and how they affect society and liberal democracy. Nice to see you again, Francis. How are you?
I'm good, Elena. It's great to see you again.
And we're meeting in Mexico this time.
We are in Puebla.
In Festival of the Ideas. So I was hearing yesterday about your talk about the crisis that we deal with today, the concerns that we have today in the world, and the concerns that are in the heart of the agenda. They were in the heart of the agenda of Davos a month and a half ago. I heard them yesterday. You were outlining them all very, very nicely. Crisis in democracy, concerns about AI, concerns about the fact that we have a level of growing inflation that generates problems in growth and other stuff, and concerns about global warming that actually generate divisions in the world today,
right,
and in the way the society is operating. Where in all this do you see informality being involved or playing a role?
Well, informality really has to do with the lack of formal institutions, property rights, and a system for adjudicating disputes involving property, and therefore you need institutions which are trusted rules that people agree to use in order to settle disputes and prove ownership, things like that. And I think one of the things that's been happening is a decline in trust in institutions across the board. And this is really true in virtually every country where, the government, political parties, scientists, labor unions, corporations, all of these institutions that structure society are losing confidence on the part of people. And that obviously will affect things like the courts or, land registries, cadasters. I mean, these are things that we pretty much have taken for granted, that once you have a piece of paper showing that you own a piece of land, that's it. But that may not be true any longer.
Informality is kind of transcendent. You can find it in very poor countries, you can find it in very rich countries. You can find it in Latin America or in Africa, for example. It's very, very prevalent. But you can also find it very prevalently in European Union, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
And it does come from a layer of different rules and different regulations and different administrative requirements that in the end trap an individual in inability to figure out, a predictable procedure. What do I need to do in order to prove who I am? Yeah?
Right.
For example, I know about this woman. She was spent 11 years in a European Union country, I don't want to mention the name, trying to prove that the papers she had, which were all formal, all registered properly, and she herself, an educated woman with an ID and a passport, she spent 11 years trying to prove to the system that she was indeed proper and formal. And these 11 years meant that she was no longer in the market. So what type of change would be required for such a transformation to take place, you think? Not just for a country. Let's say for a country first, and then let's see how we can escalate this in a universal space.
Well, you need state institutions that have the capacity to register property, to keep those registers updated. You need a court system, because if you get into a dispute over property, you need a way of adjudicating them. Court system has to be fair. It has to be reasonably quick. There are many countries where you can't litigate because, it'll take you 6 years to...
Or 11 in this case.
Or 11, to come to a decision. So all of these are issues of state capacity. And then finally, even if you have a state, if people don't trust the state, then they're not going to obey, its commands. And that, I think, is a problem that it occurs in an increasing number of countries now.
Okay, so if we were to be invited to a round table from, I don't know, some people in these governments, they would say, how can we get there? We know we want to go there. What would you suggest? I mean, I'm wondering myself, we're doing this campaign because we want to generate awareness of the problem, and we want to generate a push towards, establishing at least some security and some relaxation to the most basic issues, which is who I am, who am I, and what do I own?
Well, all institutional reforms are grounded in politics. Politics is really about power. You don't create an institution and it doesn't work properly unless it has power behind it. And in the case of property rights, that includes not just judicial institutions, but enforcement institutions. There's this famous story about Nigeria where if a middle-class family leaves their house, they have to leave up a sign that says this house is not for sale, because somebody could come along when they're gone and say, this is my property, and sell it out from underneath them. And that's a matter of enforcement. I mean, the government there is too weak to really enforce these kinds of rights. And that's why you get these swindles and fraud and so forth.
So in my experience, also having worked at the World Bank and having worked in development itself, I noticed that there is a point where, policy advice stops. Either because they consider this advice to not be prudent to continue to be given, or because they don't consider the advice that they give to have an effective outcome.
Mm-hmm.
That's a situation I think we find ourselves in right now. A development paradigm that is easier to talk about macroeconomic adjustments. It's easier to talk about inflation control, although it's a difficult subject, an extremely difficult subject, because we deal with 2-3 players. We deal with the Federal Reserve, we deal with the central bank, the Ministry of Finance, the Treasury, in the case of the United States. But when we deal with institutional reforms, as you say, we deal with politics. There are too many players engaged that need to align themselves in order to have an agreement, right? Do you think that the population's demand would help?
Well, I mean, no political change really ever happens purely from the bottom up or from the top down. You need to really have both of them. You need leadership. You have to assemble a coalition. It has to have a clear goal. But then you need grassroots support. You may need civil society organizations. You may need, other types of actors that support, the goal of the change.
Yes, and imagine the way we handled global warming. We're still not successful, but it did require a lot of bottom up, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of awareness from the bottom. And I'm really hoping that we will be able to generate some sort of awareness and a consciousness of what is really the problem.
No, I think that's important in the case of informality, because I think most people don't recognize what it is, they don't see it, and they don't understand how detrimental it could be.
It's invisible, right?
Right.
And then we tend to confuse it with poverty and illegality, tax evasion. It's interesting that people still consider informality to be related to tax evasion, which tax evasion is an illegal issue. I mean, you
right.
don't...
Well, informality is technically illegal, but it's driven by other social forces other than an intention to commit a crime.
Correct. I mean, you can be informal and not be illegal because you're not able to prove your identity. You may have a license like Mohamed Abouaziz in Tunisia, but it may not be the appropriate license, and therefore the discretion of how to use that license or how that license has been issued may be, the result basically may be an illegal one.
Right.
In the end. You know all about our work on reality check, which basically tries to identify through history all the layers of rules that have been applied in a country, and they have bottlenecked the country. we have used it in Peru, for instance, with great success. Do you think it would be one way to apply together with other elements so that we can maybe finally get to transformation of informality?
No, sure. I think reality check is a very useful methodology for trying to establish the extent of informality and putting people on the path to doing something about it.
Thank you very much for spending the time today with us.
Yes, of course.
Thank you for listening. Stay tuned for the next episode.